All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the remote celebration of Cambridge Art Association's April exhibit, Give and Take.
Sure, but we don't have audio.
Please make sure to mute yourself. I'm Erin Becker, Director of the Cambridge Art Association. Give and Take is a part of our member curatorial opportunity series and was curated by CAA members Kathryn Geismar and Alexandra Sheldon. Give and Take also features work by Deborah Baskin, Margaret Scoppa, and Kim Triedman. During tonight's event, we will share a recorded tour of the exhibit, followed by a slideshow of all of the artworks included in Give and Take, created by CAA's Assistant Director, Rebecca Schnapp. We will then hand things over to Kathryn and Alexandra as they share what brought the artists of Give and Take together. Before the end of the event, we will have time for breakout rooms where you can socialize with the participating artists and each other. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to remain muted during the speaker portions of this event. I'd also like to remind you that this event is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube later this week. We do ask that you use the chat, which again, you'll see in the bottom toolbar. It looks like a little thought bubble, to let us know where you're joining us from tonight and if you're here to support one of the exhibiting artists. You can also direct message other attendees by clicking on the blue Everyone button in the chat and scrolling to select a particular person. I am joined this evening by CAA's Assistant Director, Rebecca Schnapp. And if you have any troubleshooting questions, please send those directly to Rebecca. And finally, during the artist talk portion of the event, if you do have any questions, we ask you to use the hand raise function, which you'll see under reactions, which is the smiley face with the plus sign, to let us know if you have a question. Alternatively, you can type your question directly into the chat. As we begin tonight, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are gathered on, both virtually and literally. Tonight, I join you from Somerville, Massachusetts, which is on the traditional lands of the Massachusetts and the Wampanoag. And as an organization, the Cambridge Art Association acknowledges the painful history of genocide and forced removal from this territory. And we honor and respect the many different and diverse Indigenous people still connected to this land on which we gather. With that, thank you again for joining us. And I'm pleased to share the exhibition video with you, created by Rebecca Schnapp. All right. Thank you. Ooh, I'll say real quick, thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that video. A quick note before we hand things over to Kathryn and Alexandra, all of the work available or in this exhibit is available for sale, and Rebecca will share the online exhibit link. So if you're interested in taking any of these pieces home with you, you can peruse our Shopify page to do that.
Right, well, I'm going to try to share my screen, which is kind of new for me. Thank you, Erin and Rebecca. We're all very grateful for everything that you've done. And hello to everybody on Zoom. Welcome to Give and Take. I'm going to read a bit of a welcoming statement. I'm Kathryn Geismar, and I'm going to read a bit of a welcoming statement, and then each of the other artists will briefly speak as well. So, whoops, I'm sorry. I've got to go all the way back through my presentation somehow. It is not lined up. Okay. To quote from our exhibition statement, we're 5 artists who find a fascination in the poetic energy of things. Colors, old surfaces, blocks of wood, expired books, rusty objects, painted newsprint, discarded ephemera. Stories are suggested and found in the meeting place where objects come together and find a new identity. There is a huge respect for the serendipitous and the synergy of meeting the materials in the middle. Artists are often scavengers, but collage artists are even more so. Old newspapers and packaging, tossed out window frames, and disparate planks of wood on a curb become our treasures. They speak to us and invite us to collaborate. What is discarded and overlooked by many is more than a fascination. For us, it is rich and evocative source material. A found object might suggest a story. The color of a flower engender a day's worth of color studies. A burnt piece of wood convey an elegiac narrative. Alexandra and I believed that the 5 perspectives represented by the work in this show would speak to and even amplify one another if they were brought together in a curated space. We're delighted with the way the pieces relate to each other, and we look forward to the conversations that they might have with you. Each artist in this show has her own repertoire of materials and her own process. Deb Baskin takes pieces of lumber and discarded rusted metal elements and scorches, hammers, and unites them into abstract sculptures with figurative connotations. The poles that she creates are at once elegant, solemn, and heartfelt, with a clean, stark palette and a strong Japanese influence. Margaret Scoppa has a treasure trove studio of discarded flotsam and jetsam that she's been collecting for years. Found pieces speak to her, and she listens, joining them with other pieces from her collection, resulting in sculptures with unexpected humor, whimsy, and absolute seriousness. Kim Triedman uses figurative imagery to create powerful political collages that are at once beautiful in their palette and sometimes sobering in their message. The fragility of the human condition is conveyed without words. Alexandra Sheldon is a collage whisperer who is unafraid to play and explore with paint and paper and color until an entire abstract world emerges. Her work draws on a lifetime of making art. Deb, Margaret, Kim, and Alexandra will each speak to you about their own work, and I wanted to share a little bit about mine. In the early months of 2018, I made my first collages. They provided a way to explore themes that arose after an illness. The process of collaging connected me to a tenuous and fragmented experience over which I felt I had little control. Journal entries, painted gestural strokes, drawn portraits, mylar overlays, and tape conveyed the fractured and vulnerable uncertainty of that time. In late 2018, when I began working with Alexandra, my ideas about collage developed in a whole new way. Through her teaching, I discovered the beauty of the overlooked and the endless possibilities of playfully combining disparate elements in a responsive, intuitive process. Collaging quickly became a rich and powerful medium for me to explore. The making of the materials was unself-conscious and exciting. The process of combining these materials felt liberating and new. The pieces I chose to show in Give and Take are all recent and quite painterly. They're a celebration of bold gestures counterposed with small moments to create a cohesive rhythm, and none of them began with painting at all. They all started with marks that were created on old newsprint that was used like a drop cloth. These are the papers that are often thrown away, the ones used to catch excess marks underneath objects or materials that are being painted. Alexandra calls these catch-alls. Each collage started with a specific catch-all fragment that was glued to a substrate of canvas or board, and then responded to with more painted paper, or acrylic paint, or a mylar overlay, or a drawn line. The process unfolded bit by bit, covering over, tearing off to reveal, stopping when satisfied, pushing that further, exploring a new element, then simplifying again. It was an extended game of hide and seek with color, paper, paint, pencil, and glue. The give and take of collage is very forgiving, and the materials are not overly precious. It is a process that relies on a strong sense of design and an equally strong desire to ask the question, what if? Change is always possible. As we said in our exhibition statement, collage is about sticking things together. It's also about taking things apart. Paint over, tear off, nail on. This is the give and take.
Hi, so I guess it's my turn. Hi, everybody. I'm Alexandra Sheldon, and I am a collage and mixed media teacher. So I have so many materials in my studio. Oh, I just want to start I'm starting my 3-minute thing just so I don't go over this. I have a million materials. I have a million painted papers. Part of my philosophy of making collage and mixed media on paper is to not feel like I'm working on something that is supposed to be finished or good. And so a lot of the work is the process of maybe painting, collaging, different techniques of drawing, studying other people's compositions. I was doing that today in a class I was teaching. And so I just have all these materials, stacks of paper, piles of paper, not too many, but quite a bunch of things in my studio. And what I do is I take papers, I look through my piles of stuff, and I might find one little thing that just sparks a kind of interest. It might look beautiful or intriguing. And then what I do is I try to find more things that kind of magnetically go with it. Thank you. And I'm often loving what Kathryn referred to as the catch-alls, these pieces of paper that I put on my table under what I'm working on, and they catch all these unconscious marks. And so I'm often using the catch-alls as maybe a ground and then finding the sort of objects. Some people might think that making abstract work is kind of a big free-for-all and you're just expressing yourself, but it's actually not very different from painting classically. And I'm very classically trained. I was a landscape painter for over 20 years of my life. And all the same stuff is important, you know, like color and movement and composition and a relationship to the edge of the piece. And let's see, I just wanted to say, so basically the exact same issues are at play. I just only have less than a minute left, so I just want to, I wanted to say that I'm very surprised by this work that I do. I didn't think I would end up making this kind of work. I used to sort of know who I was, and now the older I get, the more I don't know who I am at all. And but what I love about this kind of work is that it's extremely fun. I love teaching it. I love doing it. I put on music, and I feel like I'm in new territory, and I'm kind of like a little kid again. I wrote here, I start and I build surfaces up, and then I might paint into them, and then I might take stuff off by scraping or sanding or peeling. And then I try and simplify the whole thing, and then I go back to gluing things back in. And I just wanted to say, there it is, the give and the take. Oh, sorry, that was my little alarm. Oh my God, shut up. Sorry. That's really bad. Okay, well, I finished with a splash. Okay, and thank you everybody for coming. I'm so pleased.
Hello. I'm unmuted. So is it my turn, Kathryn?
It is.
I don't see oh, there we go. Thank you. So I just wanted to say that I started making these totems about 1.5 years ago in Vermont, where I spent a lot of time. And I was basically just sort of out of materials, the usual paper materials that we use to collage. And I was working on a renovation project of a log cabin home, which is ours. And I had my eye on a bunch of cedar pieces and logs that were left over from this. And so I just started, I felt compelled to build with them. And I had learned from Alexandra that you can sort of find any source material for the collaging. And I just started stacking them, and I stacked them, and then I started treating the surfaces with different paints and charring and different materials just to see what would happen. And I guess they're sort of like 3D collages. And then as I started creating the wooden sculptures, they started to look like figures and people. And then I started to sort of pair them up and realized that they were sort of in conversation with each other. And so building and stacking logs, and I use pieces of rusty old material that I found in our property, which is, you know, over 100 years old. And I just sort of put them together and sort of create these pieces.
Thanks, Deb.
Yep.
Margaret.
Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Scoppa, and welcome to Give and Take. I'd like to thank the Cambridge Art Association for all the work and putting into the show, as well as Kathryn and Alexandra for putting all the work together to put the show on. I am a collector. For several years now, I've been scavenging and collecting and hunting for materials, and I've ended up with a studio full of stuff, and it's categorized in my way, and I know where everything is, and I have boxes and boxes of stuff. And so this body of work is a result of my fascination with found materials, as well as things that I make and other materials that I take apart and put back together. And in some way, in the end, it finds a meaningful place. And it's just a wonderful experience, and I have a ball doing it. I don't work with an idea in mind. I usually work with a piece that grabs my attention, and it goes from there, and I build on it. So I never really know in the end what's going to happen, but that's part of the process. So it is, you know, what fuels me is the hands and my mind connection of working with these materials and taking them apart and moving them around my table. And it's just a wonderful experience. And I also wanted to say, in some of these pieces, you'll see humor and whimsy, as well as you may see something more serious. But all in all, I've had a wonderful time making them, and it's been a great experience. While I'd love to see all of you in person, it's great that you're here, and I thank you for attending this event. It means a lot to me. And if you would like to see more of my work, you can see my website at margaretscoppa.com. And thanks again.
Thanks, Margaret. All right, Kim.
So thanks everybody for coming, and thanks so much to Kathryn and Alexandra for pulling this together. I'm the closer, and I promise I'll be brief, 3 minutes max. I want to start by saying I'm a poet and a novelist, and I came to visual art very late in my life. I began working in collage only about 5 years ago, basically because I was unable to write. It had been about a year since I had written anything, and I was thoroughly miserable. But I've always been a maker, and I mean, from the time I was a child, and I come from a family of women artists. The men are all on the science side, the women are all artists. And I just kind of fell into collage by accident. I started working directly onto old windows only because I happened to find one at a time when I was thinking about collage, and and that was the beginning. But I found that I liked the way the panes, the window panes invited me to break up images in interesting ways. So I played around with that for a couple of years, and I'm still doing some of that, although I've moved on to other substrates. It didn't take me long to realize that I was still telling stories, just with totally different materials, not intentionally, but in a kind of subterranean way. Images for me tend to choose one another. Patterns emerge through repetition and variation, and the stories that come out on the canvas or on the board or on the windows are suggested as much by what I put into them as what, or what is left out of them as what I put into them. This piece is called "The Lord, She Will Carry Us," and I think you can see some of what I'm talking about here. I began with the image at the bottom, the photograph. It's a fantastic, evocative photo of a dancer in a kind of ecstatic frenzy, I guess. And what grabbed me first were the curves. I was fascinated by them, the arches of the body and of the, particularly the left hand. They got into my head, and I found myself pulling in other pieces, like the section in the upper right hand corner from the work of from a work of Gustav Klimt. Again, you see hands interconnecting. You see these the roundness of the heads. You see the palette repeating itself, the blacks and the browns. And a beautiful paper that I had, that black and gold, the black and gold cathedral arches at the bottom, and just simple circles, and it all just sort of pieced itself together, circles and colors and hands. Increasingly, my work seems to focus on issues of gender expectations, both historical and evolving perceptions of femininity and sexuality. I'm especially interested in the notion of nostalgia, how old perceptions collide with current social realities, and the emotional artifacts that women continue to carry as a result. In this piece, Misogyny, you can see that I've explored these collisions head on. You can notice the softness of the female form, how the curve of the body represents a kind of freedom and the beauty of that freedom, but also from a different perspective, a kind of chaos, something ungovernable, uncontrollable, something beyond what is acceptable. And so we have the men to the right representing this different perspective, their guns, the harshness of their angles, the darkness of their amassed form, even the mathematical equations scribbled in the background, the need to control, the call to order. From the start, I've found it truly amazing to see how two distinct images placed in proximity can create a totally new and unexpected energy. In fact, for me, it's exactly like writing poetry. Something grabs me and then the process itself takes hold, like a spooked horse or something tumbling down a hill, until it finally comes to its resting place at the very end. And it's only then that I know what I had to create in the first place. Like an answer to a question that I didn't know I was asking. So what's become clear to me is that the resonance created by these unique pairings can be so much larger than the sum of the individual parts. And it's this energy that delights me. It's this energy I seek to harness in my artwork. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any questions for the artists? You can use the hand raise function, or you can type your question into the chat and Rebecca will moderate that.
Oh, can I heard a question on the chat, which is, how do we all know each other?
Let me switch off so that I'm not spotlighted and I can put you in the spotlight.
Well, I knew Deb, Baskin, and Kathryn Geismar because they were in my classes for the past few years. But I've actually never met Margaret and Kim. But Kathryn, how did you know about Margaret and Kim's work?
Margaret and I have been part of an ongoing critique group meeting with a curator from New York named Patricia Miranda, and who had a show at CAA 2 years ago. And so we knew each other from that. And Kim Triedman and I were put together last year, just at the outset of the pandemic, to have our work shown together at New England Biolabs. And so we were brought together, and I just thought her work was spectacular. And so that's how this fivesome came to be. A mutual appreciation.
Nice. Thank you.
And then we have another question from Gail asking, can you tell me about the title Blackberry Winter for Kathryn?
Oh my gosh, titles are so hard. It was a phrase that I heard and it just really struck me. I thought it was a really evocative phrase. And I remembered it when I was making this piece, and then when I was thinking about what it evoked for me. It just seemed, they just seemed like a good pairing. It was something I had heard mentioned. And I can't remember, it has something to do with the solstice, Blackberry Winter. I'd have to look up how it came up and what it meant, but nothing else.
And then we have a question from Janet. They said that 3D objects hadn't occurred to them as a collage form. So can you just talk about what is collage and maybe what isn't? If any of you, I'm assuming, can answer that question.
Well,
I mean,
I'll jump in. Or I guess from my perspective, collage is just, it's just the bringing together of objects that seem to sing to one another. You just know as a collage artist what, or you don't even know somehow. It really is a kind of subterranean thing in my experience, anyhow. You begin with an image and something, and it calls out to something else, and something else answers, and then you go from there. That's the beginning of the process, anyhow.
Deb or Margaret want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I'll say something about it because obviously my work is very 3D, and it was actually a really interesting process to go from my whole life's work, which was completely 3D in architecture and residential development, and I always wanted to go to 2D, and that was sort of a struggle for me until I got to Alexandra's class, and she really helped me think about the same things that I was using in architecture and planning and finishes and organizing of space, and doing it through collage, which was an amazing experience. And I did that with her for a year and a half. And then I started to sort of get tempted back into 3D. And that's kind of where the totems came out of. So it was sort of an interesting progression all around from 3D back to 2D, back to 3D, which Sounds easy now, but at the time is really hard.
Margaret, do you have anything to add or?
No, I was just thinking that, collage is, the mixing of materials and putting them together and taking them, that's what I do. I put them together, I take them apart, I fit things together so that's all I really have to say about it, but it's just a fun process.
I want to just add that I think one of the differences with collage in general is that the materials are the subject matter as well in many ways. And so, if painting, you're using the materials to convey something, and you are in collage as well, but the materials themselves are what inspire the relationships of color and form in a way that I think lends itself to 2D and 3D work. And I think that's what we've all been trying to articulate somehow. It's a great question because it's a very intuitive process where you're taking things that are either fragments of things or things that suggest something to you, and you're combining. It's a process of combining things, and the materials are so much the subject matter, which is just different. And so that can be, that's especially true, I guess, in the 3D, but it's true for both the 2 and the 3D.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And then we have a cool question from Kathy Brogan. They were wondering if Deb knows what kinds of conversations her pieces are having.
That's actually a really good question, because when I first started creating the sculptures, I didn't realize that they were going to be human-like or in conversation with each other. And that sort of was like one of the aha movements of the whole thing. But I think so, because they sort of, I would build one and I would say, wow, that really looked like a person. And then I would build another one and that looked like a person too. And then I had like a whole group of people and I sort of pair them off because they looked like they were in conversation with each other. So it's kind of like an intuitive physical relationship that people have when they're having a conversation that seems to sort of naturally draw them together. So I guess it's not literal, but it's just sort of a feeling of a conversation.
I just wanted to comment that for the pieces in this show, I started, making these things, and then one thing ended up with wheels, and it was sort of like this moving thing, and then it ended up being like a caravan by the time I finished. And it wasn't that I set out to do this, but one piece fed off the next. And then I was hunting for wheels, and I was hunting for things that would be more movement or make music or, sort of make noise. And some of my pieces, I think, would feel that way, that there is almost like a parade noise from them. And so that's how mine started to relate, and I started to make more of them as I went along.
I think there really is a process of sort of tripping along after you've begun tripping along and figuring it all out each step of the way, and it's not even figuring out like in a mathematical sense in any sort or rigid sense in any way, but it's just being open to the next thing that's going to jump on board, which is pretty cool, and you totally lose yourself in it.
Yeah. So for next questions, it looks like we have a couple of hand raises, so I'm going to have Kathleen Henry unmute themselves.
Okay, I have a question for Margaret Scoppa, but for everybody else too. How do you know when your piece is finished, and is it hard to let a piece be finished?
Okay. That's a very difficult question, because there's a fine line between something being finished and then overworking it. Very difficult. And what I do now is I put mine aside. You know, when I start to like really fool with it a little bit too much, I get a funny, feeling about it, and I'll put it aside for a couple of weeks, or I'll put it on my table because I've got this huge, I don't know, 4 by 10 foot table. I'll put it across the table and I'll let it sit there for a while until it tells me something. But I have learned the hard way that you can ruin something by overdoing it. And so it's, but you can always take it apart too. And then I use the pieces in something else. So it's not like I never lose anything, but that it's a great question. Thank you.
And then the next question, looks like Edwina is up next. I'll have you unmute yourself.
I just wanted to say something about Blackberry Winter. There is a very, very nice art song, the words and music of which were written by a composer named Alec Wilder in 1976, called Blackberry Winter. It's for piano and one voice. I've sung it. It's very nice. And at the bottom of the song, as it's published, Wilder wrote that Blackberry Winter is a sudden cool spell in the South coming around the 1st of June after the blackberry briars blossom. This unexpected and short winter lasts but a few days, and warm weather returns to stay.
Fabulous.
It's a really nice song.
Gail, that is what I meant to say.
I'll send it to you, Kathryn.
Thank you.
It's a great song. Alec Wilder wrote some really great songs.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And then next up we have Lorraine. Lorraine, I'll have you unmute yourself.
Hi. Could you, I love your work, all of you. This is a wonderful, wonderful show. Could you talk a little bit about could you turn yours down?
It's like a rock concert.
Yeah. I know. Can you turn it down?
I did.
Okay. He's yelling at me. Can this marriage be saved? What was it like, if you could share the whole experience of putting together a live show with COVID? You talked a bit about how you got together, but the logistics of who did what, who curated, did you hang it yourself? How did you get it to Cambridge? That kind of thing. Was it all done with email? And could you talk about the process a bit of the show and Cambridge?
Well, I guess I can jump in because I think I was the one who sort of saw these 5 people coming together. I'm probably the glue that knew everybody. And I knew the space intimately, so I could see how the work would have really interesting conversations with one another in the space. And I think because most of us were known, at least in some ways, to one another, there were relationships that were in real life to kind of ground the whole conversation and the application process. This was a Cambridge Art Association has twice a year, they offer members a chance to curate a show, and it's a juried process. So this came out of writing a proposal and choosing the work that we would show and being able to envision the show. And that was a year ago. And since then, the work was dropped off, and after a lot of negotiations of how it was all going to be done, and Alexandra and I met in the space, and we felt like, I think we were playing with Deb's help as well for about 5 hours in the space, kind of moving things around. It was very physical, actually, which was really fun. And trying to sort of locate the conversations that we wanted the work to have. I keep using that word because it really feels like, especially when three-dimensional work was involved, that things started to come to life in a whole new way. The way you moved around the space and the way you saw artwork through Deb's totems, and the way Margaret's pieces just sort of enlivened the work that was on the wall. So that was our process. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that, but.
Well, if no one has anything to add, we have one more question and anybody can answer it. It's from Stephanie, and they asked, how has the past year influenced your work? A loaded question.
Well, I'll jump in, I guess. I think it's been a combination. As an artist, I've had a combination of both highly productive time and seriously non-productive time. There has been so much loss universally, nationally, worldwide. I've also had a lot of loss personally, and I've found that there are times when I need the art. I need it to process what's going on. I need it to make me feel better, because it's one of the only things that I can slip into that really takes me away from it all. But by the same token, there have been times when the pains have been too great and I just can't find my way there, you know, can't open the door to the studio. So.
You know, I just want to comment that I think for me, this year has been, I've had a kind of a tough year personally, but it's making art has always been something for me that is a meditation almost, and a place where I can relax and go and takes my mind off things. So I used this year to really, even though I was very troubled about many things, use this year to work to just be focused on making something, and also using what I had in my studio, because I was really unable to do my foraging and my scavenging, which is one of the things that really fuels me. So I had to do that scavenging and foraging in my studio, and that was an interesting process for me. Using things that I have rather than continue to go out. So thank you for that question.
I'd just like to say one thing about that, about how this last year has influenced. Am I on? I don't know if anybody can hear me. Okay, yeah, just we're almost going on 7:30, but I just want to say that it's so incredibly great for the connection I've had with other people in making art, because I teach art online in Zoom classes, and we all make art together as if it's just a total urgency, and the connection with each other is just so important. I don't know, I'm finding, I think I relate to what Kim said and Margaret, that it just makes me feel better to do it. And then if it's in connection to other people, it's just like a win-win. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to add to that question? It's the last one until we move on.
Can you hear me? This is Stephanie O'Neill. I just like to add that I'm so disappointed I can't be there in person, and sort of look at all the work of all these artists pretty with a lot of intention, because that would be great to then ask you questions. I'm so sorry I can't see it better than I can, but I just wanted to also say I appreciate the fact that you have put this together in terms of having an audience and making the efforts to put the work together. And it's, you can tell it's beautifully hung. So I applaud you there. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you to all of the artists in Give and Take. You can stop by the gallery. We're open Tuesday through Friday, noon to 4, and I think we're going to be open on a Saturday in April. So stay tuned on our website for that. I know we're getting close to 7:30, but folks who want to stick around, we are going to open up breakout rooms. Each of the participating artists will have their own breakout room. And when we open them, you'll see a thing pop up on your screen, and Rebecca's going to explain how it all works. If you do want to leave, again, thank you for joining us tonight. But if you want to say hey to the artists and have a little chat with them, each of the 5 artists will have their own breakout room. And so I'm going to hand that over to